Welcome to the Boomer Briefing podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Marc Staut, Chief Information and Technology Officer at BoomerConsulting, and with me today is Steve Perkins. Hi, Steve. Thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Mark, thanks for thinking of me.
Absolutely. Steve is the Chief Information Officer at HoganTaylor, and today we're going to be talking about data governance. So, as we get started in this, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your firm?
Yeah, we're based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've been with the firm for 17 years, since we were about 49 people. Now we're 400 plus and, growing around the world with outsourcing, offshoring. When I came here, I was the only IT person, and now we have a team of 11. So seen it all, done it all through pretty massive growth, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, that's usually the way it goes, right? I think that part of the wisdom that we get is by being on the journey as we help the firms grow and take them to those new levels. And I think that's a really good kind of segue for what we want to talk about today, which is really around data governance. And why don't you give us a little bit of the setup for where things were when you started looking at data governance? What was the initial state?
Yeah, I have to go all the way back to 2006. Actually, when I got to the firm, we were 49 people, like I said, and we were sort of in a state of chaos, what you would call chaos of an IT function. I replaced a guy that didn't leave them in good shape, and I looked for a way to get out of that and find some path or model or plan or something. And I found this really cool plan, I think from Harvard Business Review, called the IT Management Maturity Model. And I said, wow, this is it. And it showed me all the steps, things I would need to do to take IT from chaos to business value. And it's all the things in between that we've all done in our firms. And it's setting up monitoring, standards, consistency, things like that. And I didn't know when the data stuff would come along, didn't foresee that at all. But about 10 or 12 years ago, we started performing what would be a precursor to data governance, and that's retention and destruction. Knowing what data we've got, how old is it, what do we really need for risk, and to alleviate risk, and let's start destroying it, have a plan to do that. So we did that, been doing that for years. But we really had no data governance. We didn't have rules about how data was entered and really good consistency, or we didn't have definitions about what a employee meant to the firm, what data points comprise an employee or a client for that matter. But we started kicking some ideas around about 5 years ago about a data warehouse, actually, and integrations between systems. And so that's where we were, and weren't really thinking about data governance at the time. But very quickly, data governance raised its head, and we found out, man, you can't really do any of these big strategic projects until you start thinking about data governance. And so that's where we were, and this is 5, maybe 6 years ago. So really interesting turn of events, and data governance on its own is a very large strategic thing that you do in the firm. And we had to do that first and get that knocked before we could start thinking about integrating and building a warehouse that was trustworthy for analytics, that kind of a thing. So that's kind of where we started.
Yeah, hearing you talk about it, it really resonates how much of the foundation it is to have good, clean data and to be able to use that for the other things that you want to do. So the strategic aspect of it isn't just, hey, we want good, clean data. It's the foundational piece of some of the other projects. You mentioned that you had a few big projects that you wanted to do. What were some of those that you needed the data cleaned up for or structured for?
Really, it was around getting better use of our data. recognition that CPA firms have been collecting data from clients and creating data about our clients and our employees for decades and not truly exploiting it, exploiting in a good way, for the betterment of the firm, or the industry. Yeah, leveraging, or not really using it to serve clients better. We just didn't have the tools. Nobody was thinking about that. Software companies were busy solving point solutions or point problems in the industry. And I'm sure I got the idea from one of my Boomer friends or somebody at Boomer that hey, we need to start thinking about our data and how we manage our data. So I started kicking around the idea of doing a warehouse, 10X thinking. And we weren't 400 people back then. 5 years ago, we were maybe 250, 275. So investing in a warehouse and a data governance project was pretty substantial. But we got buy-in on the 10X thinking of, hey, this is going to take some time. It's going to take some money, but we got to do it right. We got to act like and make decisions as if we were a 10 times firm.
Yep.
So we started doing that. And we got into data governance by, we were able to start successfully by engaging an outside attorney here in town that specialized in data and privacy and all those related subjects. And there's so much related to this, Mark. I mean, I was thinking earlier, the Venn diagram around your data looks like a daisy or something. I mean, there's the petals of the leaf are numerous, including retention and destruction. That's one of them. So data governance really is a foundation. I've talked to so many firms that have merely just started taking Power BI and attaching it to different data sources, the live data sources, and started building their reports that way. Or on the other side with integrations, just starting to integrate things together, point to point, and you eventually have this spider web. So I didn't feel like that was the right way just to churn out something pretty, but where the plumbing was cobbled together. So we really did it right. We engaged an attorney, got our policies about our data down pat. In fact, they change all the time. Privacy, because the states change their laws, the countries change their laws. But we got a crack team together and worked with an attorney and worked internally as a cross-functional data governance committee, basically, that started awesome. Looking at where's all of our data and what's the quality of it and what's the risk of having it in that place versus this place, and just looking at all of it. And that went on for a couple of years, and in fact it continues, but the bulk of the work went on for a couple of years and was the foundation of then building a warehouse and then being able to integrate systems together, because you've got to have a source of the truth, whatever that is.
Yep.
And in most firms, their core systems are the one source of the truth. And we've just not been a very good industry about data entry and keeping data clean.
Yeah.
It's the old garbage in, garbage out. And we were guilty of it too. Didn't have good rules. It's my fault. But we saw the opportunity to climb out of that and saw what we could do if we had good, clean data.
Yep. There's some statistics that are out there that say that of all of the data that firms keep, less than a third of it is usable data. Less than a third. And what does all that? What does everything else mean? That just means that that's all liability you're carrying around, or unreliable data, which could be even worse.
That's right. The irony is that CPAs, as we know, can spot bad numbers a mile away. I mean, if you give them a report, they can easily spot if something's $1 off.
Yep.
But here we are. The cobbler's children had no shoes. in that we have all this bad data.
Yeah.
And we've accepted it for years and years, decades, in fact. And So our firm is climbing out of that today.
Good. So, Steve, why don't you tell me a little bit about the team that you built? You mentioned that you started with an attorney, and then you mentioned that you had a team. What kind of team was that? What were some of the key roles that were a part of that?
Yeah, we found that pretty naturally you couldn't just pick like the people that were available or the people that could working on this. It had to be the people that knew the data. And that's your practice management, your financial data, your employee dimensions, ADP, that kind of thing. It had to be the people that worked with the data and knew the data and were literally already the governing body of the data. Even if we weren't doing a good job at it, they were already the people that were managing the data. And for us, that turned out to be heavily based on our practice engine steering committee, sort of, because that's a lot of our core data about our clients. And then some people that were just smart with data and knew how to manipulate data and were good strategically with data. But it was also cross-functional and cross-service area. Had to be. We had to have representation from all service areas. We try to get representation from every city that we have an office in. And then on top of all that, then my business solutions group in IT, which is my kind of internal consulting group that does everything but keeping the lights on IT operations. And that's a privacy and data governance leader, Karen Favaloro, Kelly Holloway, who's our business process and analytics leader, and then Keith Pemberton, who's my software developer and applications leader. Three incredibly bright people. They all bring something different to the table. A little bit of overlap, but they all think a little bit differently. Yeah. So we had a really high caliber group that got together and started thinking about this. I was like a fly on the wall because I'm not in the details of the data. I'm, leading the people that are on my team, but much smarter people than me on the team that could move it forward. And one of the challenges was that half of this team is client facing, and there's 4 or 5 months out of the year, maybe more, that they're not available. You can't get them to work on a 4-day or even get together for half a day for a project. So there's challenges with that. Getting people on lineup calendars. That's been a constant struggle over the years, is trying to do some big projects in a professional services firm is very difficult because people just aren't available to help. But we did it and worked on it over a couple of years through COVID. Actually, COVID gave us a pretty good pause on spending on the expensive stuff like the warehouse, building the warehouse. We had to stop spending, so we were able to use that time to do data governance, because that took people's time, but it didn't take a lot of cash outlay for systems. So
almost
that was
to slow down to go fast.
Yeah, exactly. It was a nice pause for that kind of a thing. But out of the data governance committee came great things, good policies about our data and the privacy of data, because governance and privacy are hand in hand. And privacy became a very core part of all of this whole effort. So privacy, and then we came to agreement across all service areas on what services we provide, a list. This is our Bible, a list of the services we provide, and nobody can just go add one willy-nilly and call it whatever they want. We're going to govern this list because it's a fact about the firm that we have to govern. And then out of it also came definitions for what an employee means to the firm and what a client means to the firm. What data fields are required to comprise a client. So, that means that people can't just go in and set up a new client with the very minimal basic stuff so they can charge time to it today. That happens a lot. Here,
it does.
set up a client. I don't know their last name, but here's their email address and here's their first name. And the company I think is called this, but I need to charge time to them. So you've got to manage the front door. And I learned that in my Lean Six Sigma training, manage the front door. And then you've got much cleaner processes down the line. And we implemented that. We also had, well, like in most firms, not disagreement, but not everybody's on the same page about what the calculations for firm management metrics are, like an FTE.
Right.
What is an FTE? Well, different partners and different people might consider those differently versus our accounting department, finance, for the financials. So they, out of the data governance group came the definitions for managing the firm of all of these things: utilization, what's realization, what's contribution. So
yeah, no more interpreting it in the best possible light. You have honestly set up and negotiated agreed upon standards ahead of time. So now we're comparing apples to apples versus, apples to oranges and apples to grapefruits.
Yeah. Yeah. We knew that we couldn't start building dashboards and cool reports and ask Power BI natural language questions if it was going to push out things that we couldn't agree on between service areas.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So governance
is that some of the next steps that you're looking to take with the data now that you've got it cleaned up? How are you looking to do new projects and apply that?
Yeah, we have implemented a tool called Boomi, which is a master data management system, and it allows you to implement the things that came out of data governance, which are, here's what a golden record is for an employee. Here's what a golden record is for a client. And you apply rules to it in Boomi. And so data can come out of the source originating entry system. It goes into Boomi first and passes through our filters of our business rules. And if it's not a complete record, it gets rejected, and a data steward has to go fix it. And then it can go into the warehouse if it matches our business rules. That just felt like a natural to me when I heard about master data management and what we were doing with governance. I thought, well, this is a natural thing we have to do. That you can't. Otherwise, the data that can go into the warehouse can still be dirty and incomplete and wrong.
And then you're going backwards. Yep.
That's right. And so it seemed natural to me to do governance, privacy, master data management, and then a warehouse last. And the beautiful thing, once you've got that ecosystem, and this was the vision all along for me, privately and somewhat publicly, was that once we got these systems in place, then suddenly the warehouse becomes your source of the truth, that from there you can integrate anything. Any system that you spin up that needs data can now just come from one place, the warehouse, and not hopscotching data around and trying to keep track of integrations and APIs and things that break. So now we have a data clearinghouse in the data warehouse. Pretty neat.
That's awesome.
So we're excited
Steve,
about it.
I cannot believe that our time is almost up. As expected, we figured we would get on and start talking and it would just fly on by, and sure enough, that is what happened. So thank you very much for your time today, Steve. It was amazing to hear your insights. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We talked about technology today, but we also cover topics related to leadership, process, talent, and growth. What all the topics have in common is that they are crucial to your firm's success in helping you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. So if you like what you heard, please subscribe, and thanks for listening. And once again, thank you very much for your time today, Steve. I really appreciate your insights.
Absolutely. Happy to do it, Mark. Thanks for inviting me, and I'll see you soon.